So you talk about the SOC, and you talk about how you're depending a lot on network data for the SOC. But when we talk about the logs to actually do an investigation in the SOC or even to do an incident response, we'll get into a little bit of this later when we enter the scope of an OT SOC. But when we talk about secure by design, there's also, you talk about secure by operations. I guess bringing this into a conversation about the SOC, which Adam wants to talk to about a lot, where are we at with these devices actually sending logs that are not just about temperature and pressure and operations, but also sending the type of logs that are relevant to a security investigation?
Well, you all have much more hands-on experience, but just from a standpoint of logging and in general, if you don't have the right information, for example, especially some of the IT world, which I know some of you have the experience, you're looking at the system. A lot of these logs, especially for legacy devices, you can't even tell which one it's coming from, right? I mean, there's 100 of them out there, and you're just receiving those data and such, and it's not really equipped, especially in more of these legacy devices, to have the information necessary that is what we consider more of an audit log, right? So I mean, you've got a challenge in general when you're working with, let's say, probably over half of the equipment doesn't even have the information that you need on it, and it's remote. You have no idea. There's one person that installed it, and that person's dead. So you have it's a thing. I mean, it's out there for years. So it's a challenge, and there's only a certain very small percentage that is modernized every year or replaced. So we've got a long way to go, and that causes a lot of problems in the SOC, and being able to review the logs and understand them, let alone you're going to be missing so much data.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
What is the average longevity of a product that's installed in a customer's operations?
30 years or more. So, we do 30-year and 40-year PKI certificates for those products.
I don't even think logging was invented.
It wasn't,
no,
right?
No.
I mean,
Nixon was in office.
Right.
I mean, like, yeah. A few years ago, I got to participate in a program called Radix, which was on Hook Island near New York City, and we got to take over an entire island's power grid for a red-blue exercise, and I was one of the blue team captains. It was the first year they had brought in outside commercial incident response, and so I got to work with Talos Incident Response as a subject matter expert and come hang out, and I got to mess around with some RTUs that were running Windows 12, and so PowerShell implants would work on them. And it blew my mind that they had Windows 12 on RTUs, and I was like, I'd never seen a .ps1 file ever on. I was like, holy shit, this is great, and awful, but great. And I'm like, and this was in 2021 or 2020, and it was still running Windows 2012. So think right now, if something is Windows 10, Windows 11, it's probably going to be your HMI or like a Windows PE. I don't even know if they still make that anymore. I don't think they do. In 20 years' time, you're going to inherit this and abandon hope all ye learn. So you have to ask yourself a really important question. You have limited money, you have limited time, and the guy who probably had it retired or died. And how are you going to secure that? And you need to make really, really mercenary decisions with your leadership and yourself, and be real and be practical of where you can invest the most amount of security for the most return, because you can't unhook it and throw it in the garbage. It's going to last you 30 years, and it costs a crap load of money to begin with, and there's not any capex to rip and replace. It's not going to happen. So you're being dealt a really bad hand of cards, and you have to play it the best you possibly can. Welcome to security, I know. But like, it's depressingly common. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
So Joe,
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about secure by operation, secure by design. These are new concepts, right? And the average longevity is 30 years. I mean, in IT, we have COBOL. We did J2EE to try to modernize that. It's a little easier. So when we talk about, concepts in security, we can't just say, well, we're going to prevent it. So when we talk about, we also need to be able to detect it and respond to incidents. So that necessitates a SOC approach, right? So OT SOC. I guess in Joe's kind of approach, raise your hand if you have an OT SOC. Okay.
You fortunate few.
Yeah. Awesome. Yes. I should have done a bet earlier. What percentage of the audience do we think has OT SOC?
Yeah, sure.
So do we hybridize the OT SOC with IT SOC because there's expertise in running operations? What's the thought there?
So first, I want to piggyback on something you guys said regarding the life cycle of the OT devices and how we're going to secure that. Especially also about collecting logs and the devices that actually
Sorry, that's it. There you go.
Thank you.
There was a button to turn it off, so it wasn't live.
Yeah, there's a button, but it just.
Go ahead,
Thank you so much. So one of the idea, like I was talking to someone over the couple of days about how can we solve this problem, or how different vendors can integrate to try to solve this problem. And someone told me something that's really interesting, that perfection is the enemy of good, or good enough, right? And we were talking about, okay, what's the percentage of the devices that can send us logs, and how can we cover everything? And he was like, we cannot cover everything. And that brings me to the thinking, maybe I'm looking for some solution for devices that will be spread of after 30 years from now, like having a majority of devices that send logs. And now it's like, what can we do today? What's the problem that we have? And that's bring to the idea of like, okay, do we need an OT SOC, and why the OT SOC is different than an IT SOC, right? And that's bring the conversation, because it does have a different challenges. What you expect from IT devices are not the same thing you expect from an OT devices. The idea also like of the legacy systems. How can we monitor them? How can we be able to say, I can see it, but I can look at the edges and try to make sure like I have like always like maybe someone in the field giving me some information, like try to be, think about differently to collect these logs from a different perspective. So that's like talking about the history. And your question was about why we want.
Well, I mean, it was an open question. We have an approach, we have a need to have the, an operations center for security?
Yes. And just from my experience in working in a SOC for 4 years, and we were monitoring 15, 20 clients at the same time. Some of them are IT, some of them are OT. And that was like 5-6 years ago. I came across someone where we have an OT, like a SIM tool, an OT SIM tool for that client. There is an incident, there's an alert, the client have IT and OT. The analyst looked at the IT SIM, done the investigation, escalated. But he didn't touch the OT SIM tool. So we went and asked him, why didn't you expand your investigation and see if there was a lateral movement from the IT to OT and see what can happen after that? Well, he said, I don't know how to use the tool. So if you you can have the tool, you can have the logs, but if you don't have the people who knows to use it, that's a challenge. Then later on down the road, we came across someone who knows how to use the tool, how to do the investigation, but their manager told them not to use the tool. So we went to talk to the manager, why did you tell people don't use the tool? Well, he said, If they escalated something to me or to us, we don't know what to do with it. So
Adam, when you came to me with this problem, I was like, makes sense to me, like hybridize it, right? You break down the barrier. If we do go from IT to OT, God forbid, something's connected. Yeah, that never happens, right? At least we can connect the dots and tell the story and understand what happened without having to have unnecessary barriers to entry. I was going somewhere with that. I was going to actually bring up Ukraine, and there's some interesting things there for you, Joe. But how do you prioritize if you're going to have incidents in one unified system? On one hand, you've got IT incidents that are dealing with business risk, and on the other hand, you've got things potentially with human lives as a risk. Like, those are two fundamentally different risk profiles. And if you have one scoring system, like one's a critical, one's a high, what's that mean anymore if you've got both of those in the same? So, Joe, we were chatting about Ukraine and some lessons learned there. Any thoughts there?
If everything's critical, nothing's critical.
Exactly.
That's the truth of it. It really, really is. So, I come from the power sector. So, we got any power sector friends in the audience? Yeah, what's up, y'all? My people represent. So, I've spent the past 13 years of my life working in power grid stuff globally, and a lot in Ukraine, especially during the war. And one of the things you learn here, at least in America, is we have such a position of privilege here, monetarily speaking. Like, if you want an atomic clock for your data center, those are $40,000 a piece. I can go get you one. All right. Now, you wouldn't need to put one in your electric substation, or if you're in oil and gas, you're not going to put it in your compressor house or your pump house. But you could get one if you wanted. We'll find the money for you. They don't have that option in Ukraine. So they're making do with what they got, and they ain't got much. All right. Even with all the help they're getting internationally from the U.S. and from otherwise. Right. So the fact that we're even talking about a SOC is like, that's big money. That's player money. All right. So many people can't afford to have it. Or they have an MSSP that they bring in. Like, if you're an electric cooperative, you have 50,000 people that you're responsible for getting power to. Man, I can't afford this amazing SOC analyst. She's amazing. She's got 10 years of experience. I'd love to hire her. Can't afford her, and I can't equip her. So like what do I even do at this position? So if you already have a SOC, just realize you're in the 1% of security operation privileges. All right. Now we get into the real nitty gritty of what about IT/OT and how do we hybridize? How do we merge it? When I was working for my electric utility, I worked for a corporate organization called Exelon. We had an OT group that primarily focused on like smart meters, advanced metering infrastructure, AMI. And one of the things that I noticed was they didn't really know anybody. They didn't know any power engineers. They didn't know any substation engineers. They didn't really know the director of OT operations for the OPCOs, the Baltimore Gas and Electrics, the Com Edisons, and stuff like that. And if I were king for a day, I would say for one day a week, you're going to go work with a lineman or a linewoman. You're going to line person. You're going to go and you're going to see what their job is like, see what technology they touch. You might get in a cherry picker and go play with the radios. It's actually a lot of fun, to be honest with you. It's really cool. If you ever want to be like, I want to be a line person, well, you can do that. Your dream can be done safely in a way that, assuming you've got the right training. Yeah. But they are so inviting. They're like, yeah, let's do that. And you will not only make relationships there. So let's say you get an alert in your OT your Clarity, CyberVision, whatever tool you're using. You're not going to know if that's good or bad. You have no idea. All right. Hey, this recloser is flapping and I don't understand. Is something wrong with the switch? Did Vladimir Putin personally VPN into it? What the shit is going on? You're not going to know. And that's okay. You're not supposed to know. But the crusty old lineman who's been there 30 years, who has an apartment down the street from that substation. Hey man, is this normal? Oh yeah, a rattlesnake got up there into the lines, and a squirrel touched the wrong thing. Happens all the time this time of year. Don't even worry about it. Yeah. Part of that was you relationship building, and part of that is you taking the time to know your business and understand the experts that are around you that have nothing to do with cybersecurity. And in a way, that is kind of a hybridized sort of IT/OT sort of perspective, if you will, in the sense that that's the way it works. So if I were king for a day, and I was telling you this before we got here, I would take my OT SOC and I would bolt them right into my dispatch center. So you're going to sit next to power engineers. You're going to sit next to the people that you're going to have to call And the Ukrainians have figured this out. They have cracked the code. They have found ways to integrate cybersecurity directly into their bulk power dispatching with the right personnel. It's a 30-second walk for them to go talk to somebody. Hey, is this cool? Is this not cool? And when this miserable, awful war is over, we're going to be taking lessons from them on how to do a really hard job. It's already hard, especially when you're being shot at. And I think we're going to have whole new models for like how we think about hybridized security in operational technology.
So Joe, you kind of broke my brain there because, as a SIM guy myself, I'm thinking about false positives and dealing with correlation rules, and like a rattlesnake in power line is not a correlation rule I would think about having ever deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I kind of went on a tangent. I have thoughts, and thank you for listening to them and letting me serenading you with them. I apologize.
Yeah.
The idea is that, it's pretty privileged to have an OT SOC, but I think that, the world needs to get to a point where we do start having more of that, and we can learn a lot of lessons from the IT SOC. We don't need to repeat a lot of sins there. My personal experience, a lot of the lessons that we're going to learn is going to be from war games. So after you do have a SOC, the first time that you're dealing with an OT, a literal fire an incident isn't when there's a literal fire.
Right.
I used to use a metaphor. The first time my operators are getting shot at shouldn't be, in a live fire exercise. But in the OT world, lives are at risk. So how do we, from a manufacturing and a vendor and an incident response perspective, how do we can do that? I mean, like, these devices have always been scoped out. They're very expensive. The systems, the labs, how do we do that?
So, and we, in addition to being a manufacturer, we have services, we have the SOC capability, and really, first off, nobody's ever working in a situation where it's only this one product. We only have Honeywell, or we only have, never is going to happen that way. And so you really need to know the environment. First off, OT asset management, even the best products, you still only get a percentage of what's in there. You've got to have boots on the ground. You've got to understand it, whether it's manufacturing lines, water, any power, anything like that. There's very rarely a drawing. You've got to actually understand it. And then with that asset inventory, you can do exercises to say which ones are your critical processes? What happens if this goes down? What happens if I get alert? You want to have that, just like you do on the IT space where you have tabletops. You can do that same thing, and you should be doing that so that you don't run into a situation like Colonial Pipeline. Oh shit, this goes down, and what do we do? And can this keep running? And people are not doing that enough, and that means woohoo. That means also not just your SOC should be involved. They should know and be part of those exercises. And I totally agree. They need to be talking to folks that are running it, maintaining it, knowing the quirks that are associated with that, so that there's no false, really crazy false positive. Because when you're in a situation and you need to be responding quickly in order to say, hey, we need to do a failover to this other thing, you don't want to make the wrong decisions.
We've got like 30 seconds left. I was going to say digital twins.
Oh, yeah. So go ahead. Yeah, there's digital twins like our ETAPS products, but, they're not perfect, right? I mean, mine are.
I'm going to give you the best advice, and I'm going to give you, if you want to make friends in OT, donuts.
Yeah.
Find those people, bring them donuts until they put on 5 pounds and tell you to stop, and you will find the right champions in your OT place. Adam, go.
One thing I always try to remind people in any talks or any classes that as a cybersecurity professionals, we are cost, we are not revenue for our organization. So our executives, especially the CFO, they don't like us. And if we are going to tell them like, oh, I want to build an OT SOC, I want more money, they will hate us more. So this is one of the many challenges that I try to bring people attention before you go asking for more money. You need to understand what you're asking for. Usually we are risk mitigation, so I need to tell them what are the threats, what is the consequences if we don't do that, and then I let them answer, do you want to take this risk or not? Usually the CFO is like, I don't want to take that risk. It's like, okay, give me the money. That's the deal.
And donuts.
Yes.
Thank you, friends.